In the first video on this channel, we discussed German tanks in Syria, specifically the Panzer IV. However, they weren't the only German armored vehicles the Syrians purchased, having purchased a variety of assault guns, including StuG IIIs, Jagdpanzers, and others. These vehicles were modified to a certain extent to fit the needs of the developing Syrian army, and were essentially the backbone of that army, along with Soviet-built armored vehicles. These World War II vintage German vehicles were used in a variety of ways, as they weren't exactly in the best shape by the time the Six-Day War started, either as stagnant pillboxes or as fully fledged armored assault units to assist in their advance on Israel. In today's video, we'll discuss the other World War II German vehicles used by the Syrians. Starting with the StuG IIIs, as the Syrians had around 28 of them active at different times, never all at once though, making it the second most active German armored vehicle behind the Panzer IV. Anyway, the Syrians modified some of their StuG IIIs by adding Breda heavy machine guns to them. The machine gun they used was made for ground use or an aircraft, and seeing how the Syrians operated some World War II vintage Italian aircraft, and during the late 1950s they were scrapped, so it made sense to reuse them rather than scrap the guns. Like the Panzer IVs, the Syrians purchased their StuG IIIs from a wide variety of countries, buying 9 from the French between 1950 and 1951. Like the ex-French Panzer IVs, these vehicles had belonged to the Beignet unit, and I'll put that up on screen now, but they were undesired by the post-World War II French army and were put into storage in the late 1940s. The exact model the Syrians purchased is unknown, at least to me. If anyone has any information, feel free to put it in the comments. But it's likely they were the G variant, or possibly an earlier F model. The StuG IIIs from France were undoubtedly in the worst condition. All 9 had been used in combat, and had almost no upkeep from the French. The Syrians also purchased StuG IIIs from the Czechs, and through their repair program, the Czechs managed to recover well over 100 StuG IIIs and had them operational in their army until retiring them in 1953, where the Syrians purchased 12 in 1955, all of which were the G variant. At that same time, they purchased 10 non-operational ones for cannibalization. Some sources claim another 10 or 20 were sold, but I couldn't verify that, so take it with a grain of salt. To round this off, the Syrians also purchased at least 1 from Romania and 6 from Spain, the Spanish ones in December of 1965. Next, the Jagdpanzer IV. The Syrians operated 6 of these German tank destroyers, all of them being the original version, being a casemate-style turretless vehicle on the Panzer IV chassis. Compared to a tank, the advantage was that more of the armor could be concentrated forward. It also had a low silhouette, and without a turret, it was cheaper to build. The obvious disadvantage being the gun could only move 12 degrees in either direction, and beyond that, the whole vehicle had to pivot on its tracks to aim. Anyway, the 6 Syrian Jagdpanzers were purchased from France in 1950. Presumably, they had been part of the short-lived Beignet unit I mentioned before, although it's possible they were recovered from battlefield cleanups or even in the French occupation zone after World War II. The post-World War II French army had no interest in the type, and like the StuG IIIs, they sat in storage until a lump sale to Syria occurred, which included artillery shells, small arms, and others, but little is known about the deal. When looking at this picture, it's one of the only few I could find of this rather interesting vehicle in Syrian service. The Hummel was a self-propelled artillery vehicle developed during the middle part of the Second World War. Weighing 26.5 tons, the main weapon was a 150mm howitzer, which fired a 43kg shell nearly 14 kilometers. Using the chassis of a Panzer III, the vehicle was certainly an interesting one to look at and in use. The Syrians operated 5 Hummels purchased from France in 1950. One drawback was that only 18 howitzer rounds could fit inside the Hummel. A specialized track support vehicle was supposed to follow the bumblebees into battle. Still, the Syrians had none of these. Ammunition replenishment would have only been at the mercy of unarmored wheeled trucks. Only a limited amount of captured German ammunition was provided by the French. During the Syrian Civil War, World War II German 105mm artillery guns were used by Islamic rebels and were observed firing shells with Cyrillic markings, so it stands to reason that the Syrian bumblebees were likewise filled with Soviet reverse-engineered copies of World War II German shells during the 1960s. I'll also briefly mention here that some sources claim the Syrians operated Sturmpanzer IIs. This claim mostly comes from an Israeli militia unit claiming to have destroyed one in the Six-Day War, and that claim is dubious at best. With all of these German vehicles in service against Cold War-era vehicles, how did they fare in combat? Well, not great as you'd expect. Syria operated about 24 StuG IIIs before the Six-Day War, plus another dozen or so non-operational ones. During their advance on the Golan Heights, the Israelis found that most had been put in defilade positions. Meanwhile, others, perhaps non-operational ones, had been half buried as makeshift pillboxes in strategic positions. 3 were confirmed to have been destroyed by Israel. No doubt there were more. One operational StuG III was captured intact and taken to Israel as a trophy. Many more, perhaps the remainder of the operational ones, were sabotaged and abandoned by their crews during the June 10th rout, when it appeared the entire Syrian army might be encircled. Very little information exists about the Syrian Hummel artillery vehicles. 5 were still in service as of June 6, 1967, but an Israeli intelligence report suggested that all suffered mechanical failures and could not be deployed before the war concluded. Another possibility raised was that they were all destroyed by Israeli counter-battery fire beyond the ceasefire line, leaving the wrecks out of sight. As with the StuG III, Syria never publicly acknowledged the Hummels again after this period. Syria also had 6 Jagdpanzers available on June 6, 1967. One was taken out by an Israeli tank, but the other 5 were curiously kept in Syrian inventory. They were not used during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. During Operation Desert Shield/Desert Storm in 1990 to 1991, when Syria briefly cooperated with the United States, these 5 surviving vehicles were categorized as arsenal-level, long-term warehoused assets, at a military base north of Damascus. In the mid-1990s, King Hussein of Jordan, who was known for his interest in armored vehicle history, unsuccessfully tried to acquire one or more for his museum. None were observed during the Syrian Civil War beginning in 2014, suggesting that they were either scrapped in the early 2000s or destroyed in storage during the conflict. Regardless of the outcome of these vehicles, I find it an incredibly fascinating subject to discuss and an excellent topic for the new second channel. Hopefully, as many of you can tell, I'm the creator of Important Naval History. I had the desire to discuss other subjects and didn't find it appropriate to do it on the main channel. Anyway, thank you for watching, and please remember to like and subscribe as it'll help the channel to grow. Until next time, my friends, have a great week.